Okay, recording should, let me see.
All right.
Yeah, we're ready, Ramona.
Yep. There we go. Okay, so I guess today we get to welcome Phil Gaines from Baltimore City. And we're gonna start out by everybody else has kind of been here. So we'll have Phil introduce himself, tell us what he does, and then we'll go into what we'll cover in the agenda for today, and move this party forward after that. Phil?
Thank you, Ramona. Again, my name is Phil Gaines. I'm with Baltimore City's Departments of Public Works, excuse me. Currently, I'm working in the Office of Equity and Environmental Justice as the program coordinator / CEO intake person. I work under the leadership of the dynamic Marco Merritt. And thank you for welcoming me to the group.
Great. I haven't seen Phil in what, a year and a half, 18 months, 19 months?
Well, yeah, that's somewhat true. I noticed we looked at each other's LinkedIn pages recently. So hadn't seen you face to face, but looking forward to seeing you again soon, and I hope that you're doing well.
Yes, doing great. Okay, so as the folks who've been here before know, we've been doing literature review for change management, and we've examined several different frameworks and methods that can possibly be implemented in the water industry. We haven't come up with a preferred method because we recognize that none of them truly meet the needs of those people in the water and of the workforce and organization and the business of the water infrastructure. We're going to work towards pulling components of each of the methodologies that we reviewed that work best for us, and maybe massaging them, retooling them so that they work best for the water industry, and develop our own hybrid of a change management methodology specific to the water industry. Then we're going to do a high-level overview of WISE and how all the pieces are going to fit together. And then Scott is going to tell us about the change readiness assessment. Tello, we can go to the next slide. There we go. So we surveyed the available methods. We looked at the standard of change management. We looked at GE CAP, ADCAR, California's change management process. And, as I discussed earlier, none of them truly deal with something that we can implement in a municipal environment. The incentive for most of these are financial. They are a profit, and their value proposition is to increase profit. Our value proposition needs to be more citizen focused, and we need to retool some of these so that it fits our type of organizations, which is our service organizations. We can go to the next slide. Our takeaways were that this whole change management initiative needs to be a process. Key success factors are related to workforce and organization, and the things that we're doing in the workforce and organizational culture teams. Approaches and solutions need to be compatible with the dominant paradigms and constraints of the water sector utilities. Like I said, these change management initiatives that are already out there and are years old count on the value proposition being an increase in profit, a decrease in defects, work really well for manufacturing, but we now need to retool this for an organization that provides service to citizens and has the constraint of not being able to leverage financial gain for the participants, for the folks raising how we can implement some of these changes to better our organization. So we have to come up with some better incentives that are not necessarily financial. It's an integrative process. We have to work with our workforce development team. We have to work with the CIP team and all of the others, because we're going to be integrating what it is that they see as improvements into the overall organization. So we're the, like I
You just cut out, Ramona.
Yeah, the video is frozen and we lost the sound. So I'm not sure if she hears us.
So she'll probably come back, Cello, and we're getting kind of close to the transition to your presentation. So maybe, you know,
Just move on.
Ramona would say that we're going to leverage the lessons learned from this literature search, but use the WISE method so that we are doing that integration and we're connected to the people, processes, and technology in the change that we recommend. And then I'd say for Phil's benefit too, that there are components of equity that we're going to want to make sure that we include. And so let's be sure that we're looking at things through that lens as well. But
Thank you very much, Scott. I think Ramona may try to reconnect because we lost her.
Yeah.
So, sorry?
Yeah,
I think she probably intentionally logged out so that she can come back.
Yeah, but you might as well go ahead, Cello, because we were going to move to you at this stage.
Yeah, so this is a really complicated chart that we discussed at the last meeting. The fact that we have all these aspects or components of maturity on the people side, on the left. Then on the right side, we have the process up and then technology, but they all impact each other. And when we change one thing, everything else is impacted. So it's, as Marco used to say, it's all about the relationships and interactions. So I'm stealing from you a little bit, Marco, you know. So if we have worked on the right side for 4 years or as part of the UAM WRF project to develop this upper right corner for the processes, the methods for maturity, how to improve it, and so forth. And from a different project, WRF 5039, we're pulling in the results that look at technology part. And our people team on WISE is dealing with these 7 categories that they have defined collaboratively, starting with 400 ideas that were further developed and condensed by the project team that included Kesra and people from all the and Alice and Lisa and people from a number of different organizations. So just to show an example, we'll show how we're proceeding on the people side, that these 7 categories are these things that are in colored, and the below are the questions that are part of the survey. So the idea is that when we get these answers, we can assess the maturity level when it's with respect to, sorry, my dog is having an attack, sneezing attack, communication, feedback, and we can identify where the potential issues are on a sort of macro level. We can see that here issues have to do with reward and recognition, employee engagement, communication, and feedback and stuff like that. So these are sort of main questions, tier 1 questions. And there's also when somebody responds and says, I know how my works relate to the organizational goals, or reward and recognition are objective, and they strongly disagree or disagree. So for example, I'm comfortable voicing my concerns and opinions. Then we have in the survey tier 2 questions. So if somebody says, I strongly disagree that I know how my work relates to the organizational goals, we have another tier 2 set of questions that help us sharpen up a little bit idea why they feel this way. Or if they say reward and recognition are objective and not based on favoritism, there are questions that go further into that topic, and so that we can have more detail about why people feel that way. So we have shown how this stuff works on the left side, which is we define the categories, we have this assessment tool, a survey produces results, and this is what we've done so far. Our next thing on the people side is to create an analysis tool to look at the pattern here and detect what are the underlying reasons and things that impact the organization. So that is going to be our next job, so we can make sense out of all these answers. So if we do this, we're doing also the same thing on the process and technology side, so that we would have all these analysis feed into change management, so that somebody working on change management has a dashboard, and maybe the reason why there's a problem implementing some technology has to do with organizational culture. Maybe it has to do with the perception of fairness or inclusion. So all that is connected. So when it comes to I'm sorry. So this is just the schedule that we plan to complete this on the workforce side of things, and then develop guidelines and recommendations that would say, in order to fix this, these are the things that you can do, strategies, and how to address the areas with low scores. So the change management would then take input from all of these things, and if somebody is looking at a specific process and trying to improve it, they could see what impacts the performance on that process. So we will always start with the process, so we don't try to boil the ocean and look at the entire organization. We can say, okay, let's see how we're doing, how our process to develop a CIP, or maybe something simpler like calibrate a flow meter. And so that we can do analysis on that. So when we look at that process, we can maybe see in the business process model for this, where there's a lot of people involved, these swim lanes show different business units and people who are involved. So we have a little bit fewer people to to look at, but also see if there's proper level of respect, trust, collaboration between different units, which significantly impact. If there's something like calibrate a flow meter where somebody follows a standard operating procedure, then we may not have to go through this kind of detail. So the first we look at, what kind of process did we select? And depending on the complexity of that process, it will determine how much documentation we really need. Because this, if it's very complex, we will need to have, fairly detailed, mature documentation. So, and then if we look at a technology, it is driven by the business needs and identified in the business process model. So that when we look at, so far we're addressing these two aspects through business process model, and I showed how we do the analysis on the people side. So we also integrate this so that we integrate the processes that drive the technology needs, and then we have these categories on the technology side, not that different also from the categories we had on the people side. So the idea is that within change management, we'll look at all these dashboards. We're going to see what's good or how people feel about the on the people side. How do they execute the work? How do they use technology, so that we can identify where exactly we can implement this improvement method that is shown on the right, which is assess where we are, analyze, design where we want to be, plan improvements, and implement improvements, and then monitor performance. So that is so for the change management, our analytical level, we be based on the output from these analysis, and our action is going to impact the recommended action that we can actually implement change will depend and may feed. There may be things that we need to do on the people side. If there's no trust and there's no collaboration, there's no respect. Some things that we need to, fix on the processes, or some things that where technology can help. So these two things, these blue things on the left, the right and the left, are the things that we would focus on in this group, using the tools and the assessments and the methods that are generated from these three components. So I want to just stop here for a second and see if there are any comments or thoughts and suggestions at this point. Ramona, are you back?
Yes, I'm back.
Okay. Okay. Can you see the screen, or we can hear you?
Yes, I
much
can
better.
see the screen. I can see everything.
Okay.
Yes.
So-
So what I want to say is, in order for us to accomplish this, it's a heavy lift. And I think we've got a head start because we've got
Yeah, you're breaking up pretty.
That has always okay. It's time. I guess it's saying I've talked enough, huh?
No, now it's not jumbled, but it was all jumbled.
Now it's
Couldn't
clear.
understand you.
Now it's clear. Okay. So what I was saying is, we've got the tools from the workforce and organizational culture. Would we
Jumbled up
develop
again.
some process and analysis tools, which I think, Scott, you may be able to help with?
Excuse me,
Or are you going to be
Ramona.
presenting later?
Ramona, excuse me. We lost some of what you were saying. Can you restate what you just said?
So what I was saying is, we have the tools that workforce and organizational culture have developed to help with this process. And we can use those tools to help inform us how to develop some process tools, which I think Scott's going to talk about doing some other assessment further on in today's meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Did anybody else have any feedback on what Cello presented? It was short, but the whole idea was that there's an integrated process, and you can't, in order to deal with change, we're doing two things. We're identifying a specific process, and then we're, in the long run, we're considering including an assessment from the workforce organizational culture, the technology, and the business process itself that can feed in to the change process that we're going to be engaged in, and that we're going to be focused on in this group. And Cello, maybe you could flip to the next slide, and I'll come back to this one. So if, any other comments, raise your hand or speak up if you want to stop at this point, or we can just continue. There are a lot of people who couldn't join the call today that we want to really give them something to listen to in the recording as well. So so moving ahead on just a couple slides here, there's an overall change process that we have to figure out. And this is just a straw man that can be used to start, the discussion, and can be something that we can look at, critique, improve on going forward. An overall change process would be, as we've said, for a specific business process, the CIP planning or CIP execution, or it could be for, say, how do we calibrate a flow meter, or it could be, large versus small. It could be large, but it's not intended to be for the organization as a whole. It's a specific process where we can take elements from those other aspects and integrate them into change. So we would be clarifying the context, the purpose and vision, expected outcomes and metrics, impacts, timing, budget and resource staff impacts, involved parties and roles, decision-making and planned future communication. Those are aspects that are part of the specific business process that we would look at, first. Then we would develop the business process in terms of as is and to be, identifying stakeholders. We would be inclusive in terms of those stakeholders. Would typically be an executive sponsor, subject matter experts, team lead or project manager. There would be a team assembled, and we would complete that business process documentation. We would identify challenges in that regard that need to be addressed. And we'd do that for the workforce and organizational culture information as well. And hopefully there would be some recommended things that are being improved there. We develop a work plan and a change management project plan for the specific improvement that we're trying to make and the change that we're trying to make. We develop a communication plan, and it would include whatever aspects of leadership that are appropriate, employees and other stakeholders, and we would basically assess where we are in terms of the change. And I'll go through, a straw man for straw person for change readiness in a bit. And then we would initiate the change project, monitor progress, make mid-course corrections in the change plan, document results, and then in the continual improvement process, continually monitor and improve that business process that we've identified. So that was an overall change process. We're going to be refining this and actually probably put it into a business model kind of format, as well. But these are some of the aspects that could be included in the overall change process. And we could either stop cello or we could go to the other slide. Not that one, but the first one, which is the change readiness.
Okay.
The one that was before that. There we go. So in looking at, just like we did an assessment of organizational culture and workforce, we did an assessment for technology, we did an assessment for the business process itself. We are able, to do an assessment of our readiness for change. And in doing this, one would assemble, it's almost like a chartering type of process, and being inclusive, assembling the stakeholders or some combination of representatives that would be involved in that change. We'd communicate the context, purpose, vision, and so forth. We'd review the as-is and to-be business process that was developed associated with what we're trying to change, including the roles and responsibilities, decision-making, technology, connections to data and information, and other business processes and organizational responsibilities. We'd review the planned change process, and then we'd conduct a change readiness survey with these stakeholders to make sure that we're prepared to move ahead and that we've identified any weaknesses that we need to address in the change itself. We'd analyze the survey results and make changes to change management process and communication. And what I wanted to do was just run through a straw man change readiness survey that is on an Excel spreadsheet. And it's not that long, but I just wanted to run through this pretty quickly. And then I think we could stop and we could talk about change readiness. In a future meeting that we have, we can refine the business process for change. We can talk about the assessment and make it better. This is just a starting place. But this change readiness assessment, if you go down the left column, there are actually 5 different categories that we would be addressing. We'd be addressing leadership, vision for change, change strategies, and if you scroll down a bit, there are 2 more, Cello. Overcoming resistance to change, and there's 1 more, managing staff performance. Those are elements of an assessment that we would do for our readiness for change. If you go back up to the top, you can see that what we're doing is after we've assembled these stakeholders, we are those stakeholders are actually conducting this survey, this assessment, and they are, like we are doing in the other assessments. There's a 1 through 5 scale for everywhere from strongly disagree to disagree, neutral, agree, and strongly agree on the assessment questions and attributes that we're covering. So you can see under leadership, to what extent do we think that there is a common vision for change? And you can read these. Leaders are committed to change. There's a strong sense of urgency for change. There's a reason to do it. The leaders understand, trust, and respect each other. We could change this to include elements of equity and inclusion if we want to be specific on that. Leaders are modeling the values and behaviors that are appropriate for this change. We're taking the time and effort to win support from staff. These leaders have a history of successful change in the organization. They have no other motives that conflict with this change agenda. They have the change that's being implemented will be supported by current management style and behavior. So this next category is vision for change, that there's a rationale, and I can read these, you can read them, but there's a clear understanding of the roadmap that has been developed to achieve this vision, the process that we're going to be undertaking, who's going to be involved, the roles and responsibilities, and so forth, that they understand what the change means to them specifically, and what they need, what their part in it is, what they need to do to help achieve the vision. So we're dealing with behaviors, we're dealing with the vision, we're dealing with engagement, and then there's a list of change strategies that we're assessing, that people are believing that the current approach that's been outlined in terms of the work process will work well in this organization, that there's a clear authority and accountability, a project structure, problems will be dealt with effectively, that we understand what the issues are, that the change progress is to be well monitored and shared with everyone, and so forth, that the existing job descriptions will support this change strategy, and so forth. And then there's a category for overcoming resistance to change. We've talked about this, Ramona, about needing to deal with not everybody's on board necessarily, and are we going to be able to overcome the resistance to change? They're encouraged to provide constructive feedback on the initiative. There's commitment of middle managers, and the commitment's been won before they're expected to lead the change if we have middle managers leading the change. that there's the skills necessary, that rewards and recognition for participating in the initiative, are there. There's communication up, down, and across the group that's going to be doing the change. Everyone who needs to know is in the know, that it's inclusive. Everybody's opinions, input, and feedback is there. That everyone knows how the change is going to affect them. They're encouraged to change. They are encouraged to change rather than being coerced into change. They are willing participants and want to change. The change process is a win-win for everybody. There aren't winners and losers, that everybody benefits from the change, that the staff expects the change to succeed, and that they have the training necessary to help make the change. So we're scoring these on a 1 through 5 score in terms of readiness. And then as we implement, that we're also managing the staff performance for the change, that we have some metrics associated with it, that policies, rules, and processes that are being changed to support the initiative. So we aren't just saying we're going to change things, that we're actually documenting the change that's going to occur in that as is, and developing that to be, that the change will be supported by the current compensation structure, appraisal, and career development processes for employees, that there's a desired level of cross-functional cooperation. It's not being done in a vacuum, that all the stakeholders that could be in different functions of the organization, if it were procurement, for example, that there's a lot of people that would be involved in this process. The staff will genuinely work to support the change process rather than give the impression that they are supporting the change, but really be passive aggressive about it. And then finally, that change will be supported by the current skill development process, that for training and so forth, that if people need to be trained and further developed in order to implement the features of the change, that is in place and that's being managed. So those are just different attributes that would need to be in place for change to be successful. And the idea is that there would be an assessment of this readiness for change, so that we can basically, like we're doing in the other areas in which Cello demonstrated, we can basically report where we're strong, where we're weak, what needs to be addressed, so that those elements that aren't in place that need to be addressed, that there would be action plans, and that it would be made a priority to make those improvements so that change can be successful. I'm going to stop. We wanted to get through this, but Ramona, Cello, we want to basically get feedback. We're not going to perfect this today, but in general, does this kind of thing, both in terms of the process that we're undertaking for change readiness, as well as doing an assessment like we're doing in the other areas, does that make sense? And are these the kind of components that we would need to include, so that there's trust, there's the right behaviors, and that there's the specific process laid out for the change that's going to occur? Feedback. Anybody? Or we can call on you.
So here's Marco.
Yeah,
and
Mark.
Yeah, I think it's going down the right path. I think that some of the questions that I have, or I think places or touch points, touchstones that are necessary, are being answered through the lines of questions that are there. One of the pieces that I think is so essential for folk in engaging change management, whether they've even considered it before or not, but in terms of those who are enabling processes and often are not part of the decision making, it's so important to know and understand their perceived value of themselves in the process. While you have not specifically asked that, I think that many of these questions will point to that. So whether you want to continue to do it in an indirect way or directly, ascertain from those involved, and not just on that level, but on all levels, how do you identify your value or your importance to the overall productivity, the overall functionality, the overall whatever it is that your goal and mission and objectives are. I think it's there.
Yeah, that's a great comment. And I think that there's an intent. It might not be expressed when we could refine it, but I think the intent is there. And then also for those that have participated in the workforce and organizational culture assessment, those aspects are definitely there. And so I think that one could say that we would do the assessment for organizational culture and workforce, and that would come out, and those would be things to address. And then when we get to the change and the change process here, then that aspect would be covered as well.
Yeah, and the key point is that this is not something we're saying, okay, this is how we're going to do it.
Right.
This is like, here's an example. So our group is going to look at this on the organizational culture and workforce. We started with 400 comments from people and spent 2 or 3 months finally getting it to, something that people feel comfortable with. But it's good to have an example to start from, and then, be changing it just a straw man. It just makes it a little easier. But it was not intended to be, okay, this is it, now that's where we're going. It's more like, there are some thoughts and let's go work on them.
Yeah, this is
Sure.
not prescriptive, and Marco, and it's also, I think the intent.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was clear. No
Yeah,
worries.
that's good. That's good. And because I think that, if you step back, what we're saying is that it's part of an integrative process with the other elements that Cello went over earlier today, and that we want to take those other elements and that are going to be helping to define the specific change, in fact, that we want to make. And now this is the process for making the change. And the idea is not to look at this as prescriptive, but it's just a straw man to get started. But it says, what would a process look like for change management, taking elements, like Ramona said, from the different models that we've looked at as a team, as well as a change readiness assessment, so that we're sure that we're addressing for the change itself. Are we really ready to make the change? And this could be in a workshop, it can be in a survey, but with the stakeholders and an inclusive group, like you're saying, not just the leaders of the organization, but the people involved and impacted by the change, so that we're ready to make the change. Other feedback.
So, yeah, it'd be great to hear other feedback. If my thought is that since we, several people had schedule conflicts and
Some of the other
everything.
things.
Sorry, Ramona, I didn't hear that.
I don't. So I what would be great to do is if we could almost do a tier 2 level of questions to go with that assessment.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Great idea. Absolutely. And even changing those questions, it's all open. And one thing that will be informative is for this group, when they see the results from the other things, the work for the people side and the process, and then see, look at all that stuff and then kind of massage it to a place where it's like really good. And it also will be like version 1.0. What we then, so when people start applying it, then Marco could say, well, these things worked okay, but these things didn't. And then Zanetta will say, well, these other, so then we'll based on the experience, and the case studies will gradually improve these tools and methods and everything.
So Ramona, that's a real good insight, because in the workforce and organizational culture, we had tier 2 questions for people that like Phil and Marco, who weren't part of that, where we not only address these questions to say we have a weakness here, but why do we have a weakness? Is it because if people don't feel like they're informed for the change that's going to happen, why is that? And we had a drop-down menu that basically had reasons why, and so that those things could be addressed specifically. Maybe people hadn't been informed. Maybe people weren't trained. Maybe people don't know what they're going to have to do. There can be a whole bunch of different reasons why. So, that's a good suggestion that we could definitely take up, Ramona.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this shows how these tier 2 questions are kind of structured. Makes it a little bit more difficult to analyze, but it's very helpful to automate the analysis when it's like this. But it's very helpful. Any other thoughts? So with your permission, Ramona, maybe I can stop the recording to keep it a little bit shorter. Is that okay?
Yes.
Let me just do that.
Because